Yeah. Um, so excited about that today. Stick around, be a part of that after the service. We've been in a series on Ephesians, and thank you to Roy who took care of it this week. Thank you, brother. Appreciate that while I was gone. Um, and we're in Ephesians in chapter 5. If you have your Bibles with you, we'll put some of the verses up on that side of the room. So if you got a Bible or an app over there, it'd be good. Be a good day to have it, but we're going to put them up. We're in this series on Ephesians called A Study of God's Workmanship. A study of God's workmanship. This reality in chapter 2 of Ephesians, where it says we are his workmanship. After we give our life to Christ, all the good that comes out, we become his workmanship. That's what this entire book is about. All the sermons, you can find them on our website. If you want to go get caught up, or on our YouTube channel, you can get caught up. This morning, we're looking at 4 verses in chapter 5, verses 15 through 18. We had a fun trip this last week. I want to say one other thing. Y'all remember, let's see, I guess it was about 6, 7, 8 months ago. I was preaching on the life of David, and I shared a little story last time I was up in Boston about the guy I met that was from India. Y'all remember? Who remembers that story? Hands everywhere. He's here today. What? VJ, stand up, VJ. VJ, hey. So we were back together, and we were back last weekend when we were up there, and he drove to Pikeville, first time he's ever been to Pikeville. He didn't come to church. He had other reasons, but I invited him to come by while he was here, and we were just talking this morning before the service about God's providence. How he brings people together, how he brings plans together, how he's always working with purpose. And I think you remember me sharing a little bit about his family and the impact his faith had on all the people around him. So I thought that'd be neat for you to see that he's here. Small world. So we traveled last weekend, had a big time. Actually, about 8 days we were gone. And let me read these verses first. I had it backward, but I'm going to read the verses. Let's read starting in verse 15 in chapter 5. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity. How do we wake up each day and see the day that's before us? Do we dread it? Do we see it as drudgery? Do we see it as it's just another 24 hours, just another section of daylight? I'm going to do the same thing. Do we see it or do we see it as an opportunity? And that's what Paul is speaking to here. He says, because the days are evil. Because the days are evil. Verse 17, he says, therefore, do not be foolish. Whoops, I was kind of messed that up right with that song right before I started preaching. But understand what the Lord's will is. In verse 18, he says, do not get drunk on wine, which leads to debauchery. Instead, be filled with the Spirit. So this morning, I want us to think here at this verse. What stuck out to me was verse 16. This verse 16 that spoke to me and said, you know what? Every day, every Christian, remember who the audience is here. Paul wrote this letter to the church at Ephesus, to the Christians, to the believers. Every day, if you're a believer, today is a day of opportunity. And he's talking to these Christian believers. He's saying, you need to make the most of every opportunity. And as I thought about that, some of us, and sometimes myself, are thinking there's no opportunity, there's no purpose, or I see an opportunity and I'm scared to pursue it and to go after it. So we're going to spend this morning just a little time looking at this, thinking about this. Because opportunity, this is the English word, or our English word comes from Latin, and it means toward the port, which suggests a ship taking advantage of the wind and tide to arrive safely in the harbor. Opportunity to take advantage of a certain time and certain circumstances. That metaphor is also taken from merchants and traders who diligently observed and improved the seasons for merchandise and trade. They got a business opportunity. But I want to share with you what Paul is talking about here specifically. As I started reading this passage and realized where I was a week ago, we were staying in a little town called Plymouth, Massachusetts. Anybody ever heard of it? Been there. I got one that's been there. Maybe more. And I'd never been. I'm like many of you grew up hearing the stories of the Pilgrims. Heard the story of the Pilgrims? They wore black and white, had that hat, they're perfect, had a little musket. And they came over. I just want to share that this is Rozzy kind of standing beside. That's what's left of the iconic rock, the Plymouth Rock. That's not all of it that once was. There's really no way that, there's really no guarantee or there's no specific history that says they did tie to a rock. It just kind of became this representation, this symbolic place of where they landed. And so this was what's left of the rock, and it's right there by the water, and Rozzy was standing by it. And I'm just growing up hearing Pilgrims, I had all of these crazy things in my mind. I thought they knew they were Pilgrims. I thought that was just a group of people. They were Pilgrims. And you just can't. Here's what happens is it just becomes this figment or this imaginary thing. You don't feel like that these were real people. Standing there in the place, reading the names and the stories of the people that came over on the Mayflower, showed me they were real people. And as you read the stories and what they faced and what they dealt with, you realize, it's different, but at the core, the things they were dealing with and facing are not that much different than where we are 400 years later. They were. I don't want to get into a big history lesson, but I kind of am going to. But they were separatists, right? In England, they were part of the Church of England, and there was a young guy, William Bradford, who ended up becoming governor of the Plymouth colony, and they started to try to separate from the Church of England because they believed differently. When they originally did that, they left and went to Holland, actually, and stayed 12 years before they decided to pack up all their things and set course to this new land. Can you just for a minute imagine that day? Many of them left kids behind, left family members behind. But I believe they saw a divine window of opportunity. And if you go and read some of the things, this is a quote from William Bradford, who became the governor. On the left, I want to read this to you. It says, "So they left ye goodly and pleasant city, which had been their resting place near 12 years. But they knew they were pilgrims and looked not much on those things." Oh, that's powerful, isn't it? They were in a pleasant place, but they knew God had some other purpose for them. They looked not much on those things that seemed so great personally, but they lift up their eyes to ye heavens, their dearest country. Where their heart was in heaven, they were looking toward heaven. It says they quieted their spirits. This is another quote from William Bradford. It said, "Lastly, and which was not least, a great hope and inward zeal they had of laying some good foundation, or at least to make some way thereunto, for ye propagating and advancing ye gospel of ye kingdom of Christ in those remote parts of the world, yea, though they should be but even as stepping stones unto others for your performing of so great a work." They felt God calling them. Let me summarize those two quotes. They felt God calling them to a window of opportunity. Another quote from William Bradford: "Thus out of small beginnings, greater things have been produced, as one small candle may light 1,000." this one small community, from Holland. Their journey on the Mayflower was just, I think it was 63 days. Mayflower was not the queen of the whatever. It's not a cruise ship, right? This was actually a freight ship. They were crammed in, 102 of them, I think, into the Mayflower in these cramped living quarters. Several of the women were pregnant, and they were just in the freight area of this ship for 63 days. Can't imagine it. I can't imagine it. When they got here, they landed, not specifically in Plymouth. It took them a little while before they decided where to make permanent camp. They got here in the fall. By spring, half of them had died. 102, they were down to 51. But they persevered. There was something inside of them about this opportunity that God had laid before them, that they pursued regardless of the consequences, that they pursued regardless of any guarantee that it would be successful. Actually, they probably thought there was a good chance they'd never survive. But they felt God calling them there. So I want us to start with that kind of thought. This window of opportunity. I started looking at my own life. And I started thinking, am I that close to God? Am I looking to God for that type of direction and guidance and what He should have me to do? So this morning, your window of opportunity, here's where we want to start. You've got one. Everybody here today's got one. And so since we're talking about the window of opportunity, I'm going to use 3 points, and I'll start with W because that's the way we do it. The window of opportunity. The first thing about your window of opportunity is you have to use wisdom to see it. You have to use wisdom to see it. See, he says here, be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise. You see, some people, opportunity is staring you in the face, and you don't see it. You don't see that it's there. And he says this call to, he's used a lot of lessons so far, very straightforward. Do this, do that. Don't do this, don't do that. Don't talk this way. Don't act this way. Don't be this way. And then he takes this a step further into that in our life, we are not just supposed to be haphazardly falling through it. Which we kind of tend to want to do sometimes. We just want like the days, just get me to the weekend. Remember when I said, somebody said, I said, what's your 5-year plan? They said, I'm just trying to get to Friday. We're just falling through life. He says, use wisdom. He actually takes this a step further than just following commandments. He said, there's something more that God has for you. He has a purpose and a will for you. He says, be very careful. What does that mean? Well, first of all, it means to be careful. Wow, that blow your mind? It means consider all these circumstances, all the things in your life, all the things around you. And as you make decisions, do things, think about the consequences. It means sometimes to look at our own behavior in the lens of our neighbors and our friends. We always set them on a much higher bar than us, but sometimes we should look at ourselves and think about, sometimes how we're judging other people. Proverbs, it says the beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. It says just knowing and being in awe of who God is where wisdom comes. You can have all kinds of knowledge in this world, but not have godly wisdom. This is about doing our best to align with God's will for our life. What's His purpose? What's His purpose? The alternative, he basically says in verse 17, therefore do not be foolish. Trying to figure things out on your own and living life based on your own dreams and your own personal kingdom, if you will, instead of focusing on God's kingdom. It says it's a fool's errand. It says the opposite of this is acting foolish. Truth is, it may not be finding a new thing to do, but realizing right where you are and exactly the people, place God has put you is your opportunity. You know, many times if we're working, or we're working somewhere, we get frustrated in a job, or we get frustrated in a season of life, we start looking at what's next, and God's saying, you're not seeing what is right around you. That I've put you in this place and this time for this purpose. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. So first, we got to use wisdom to see it. What this opportunity is not, this window of opportunity is not just about the next business opportunity or the next career move, or it's not about ourselves. This is an opportunity for kingdom work. This is what Paul is talking about here. You are seeing, you're thinking, here's why you get blinded to it. Here's what blinds you to God's opportunities around you is selfishness. It's thinking about yourself. It's thinking about what's next for me. And God is never working in your life just for you. He's working to use you to serve other people, to reach other people, to impact other people. But when we get focused on ourselves, we'll be blinded to what God is calling us to do right around us. The second thing is we got to be willing to walk through it. There's what I love about this is this essence of the time, urgency. When he says the days are evil, he's saying this is an urgent time. Like this is not like, oh, I'll get to it next weekend. This is not, why would I do today what I could do tomorrow? I've said that before. Sometimes I've lived that way. But he's saying there is power in the essence of now. You got to be willing to walk through it today. You got to be willing to capitalize and not let this opportunity go by. You got to see it as this opportunity that is urgent. See, you have one, and time is fleeting. Time can be our greatest friend or greatest enemy. You ever feel like you have enough time? Who says, I got all the time in the world? Nobody. Nobody says that. I wish there were more hours in a day. I try to make more by sleeping less. Right? We try to do that. End up staying up late and getting up early. And it catches up with you. So what we have to do with our time is be very intentional and prioritize and think about what we're spending our time on. That is what, in essence, he is saying here. Making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. He's saying you got to be intentional in what you do with your time. And then he jumps into something that's a great topic, and it's always exciting to talk about. Verse 17, therefore do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. Do not get drunk on wine, which leads to debauchery. Instead, be filled with the Spirit. This here, he is still focused on this idea of time and what you do with it. I could spend a whole sermon on drinking, right? This is the debate of the Christian church. Should they drink? Can they drink? Do they drink? If they drink, are they not a Christian? This is a great debate, right? No? Nobody has that debate? Everybody thinks they're right. That's no debate. I know the answer. Well, I want to spend just a little bit of time here because I think it's important. It's not a sermon on alcohol, but it is in the text, so we need to talk about it. One, I want to explain what that word debauchery, I'm using the NIV version here. If you use New King James Version, it uses the word dissipation. This basically says the squandering of money, energy, or resources, or excessive indulgence in sensual pleasures. Now, I want to be clear. The Bible warns about the destructive and addictive nature of alcohol. There are warnings throughout Proverbs and one here. And it's very clear that drunkenness is always wrong. It comes right out and says it here. The Bible's also clear that mature Christians should avoid causing others to stumble by drinking. and that leaders ought to avoid drinking alcohol and cannot be given to drunkenness. It's part of the list of being an elder or a deacon in the church, to not be given to drunkenness. There is, however, no verse specifically in the New Testament that says you should not drink alcohol, and that alcohol in and of itself is a sin by drinking it. Okay, I'm going to share with you the three groups that Christians fall into. This is by scholars of what they believe about this, and then we're going to move on. I'm going to share my thoughts on it, and then we're going to move on. All right, are you ready? You ready for this? Yeah, we got something ready. Three things. First is moderationism. This is a group of Christians and some denominations ascribe to this that say, you know what, the Bible doesn't say specifically you should not drink, so drinking in moderation is okay. They're against drunkenness. They may warn against drinking in front of other Christians who are young, but they essentially say it's okay to drink in moderation, 1 or 2 drinks, just don't get drunk. That's moderationism. Second is abstentionism. Fun word, really means abstinence. This is the group of Christians a doctrine that says, you know what, the Bible doesn't say you should never take a drink, but we just believe in today's culture and time with wisdom, it's best not to drink, and Christians should not drink. It says just the wise thing to do. It's not a law thing. It's not if you do it or don't. It's not in the Bible, do it or don't. But we think it's the wise thing to not drink. And then there's prohibitionism, who just say they think it's absolutely wrong to drink. You should never drink. And if you drink, you can't be a Christian. All right, y'all good? Y'all got it figured out? Everybody agree on where you stand on those three? Everybody got it figured out? What I want you to understand, this is a deeper issue. I was raised up in a culture where drinking was absolutely off the table. Christians did not drink, right? That's how I grew up. Christians do not drink. And so I come to this place not too long ago and met this guy, and Ryan is here. He was from Chattanooga. And I shared with you all not too long ago, maybe it was on a Wednesday night. He's part of this church, and I was sharing, we were sharing our faith, and I was like, man, this guy, he's a faithful Christian. He was sharing about what he'd done in his life and how God had worked with him. And then he said, you know, my favorite thing our church does is this Bible study. It's called Theology on Tap, where they go have Bible studies and drink. And so I'm questioning my whole world. I'm saying, what? Wait, those two things don't go together. So I said, I asked myself, do I believe Christians shouldn't drink because I grew up and that's what I heard and that's what our church believed? What's the Bible say? What's the Bible say? And if I'm going to believe a certain way, I want to be able to speak to it. Is that fair enough? So where am I at? I don't know. I'm probably in the abstentionism. I don't think it's in the Bible. It says you should not drink. But I am 100%. I believe that if you're in leadership, if you're part of the leadership of the church, it's just not the right thing to do. And I believe I've seen the destructiveness of it in addiction and in families and what it can do. That I feel like a church should probably not be propagating it and bringing it into the fellowship hall. But I think there's a place here. There's a place on both sides, for both sides of this. Because there's one side saying, well, there's verses in the Old Testament that says wine is good. It says God gave it to us to enjoy. And there's one side saying that wine's the devil. All right? That's basically where we're at. I think there's a place for this side to recognize and say, just because someone is a Christian and takes a drink doesn't mean they're not a Christian. It's not our place to judge on that level. Not our place to judge on that. I think there's, and to say that it may not be always unwise just to take a drink. You know, Paul told, was it Timothy or Titus, take a drink of wine if your stomach's hurting. But there's also on this side that's saying, I should be able to drink whatever I want. I'm a Christian. I'm free from the law. And there's a place to look this way and say, there's great wisdom. There is great wisdom to abstain from alcohol. There is great wisdom to abstain from alcohol. Somewhere in the middle. Somewhere in the middle. We know you can, if I said, tell me the family member that their life, their family has been wrecked in your family, you could say it like that. In Romans, let me see the verse here. It says it's not always, everything is permissible, but not everything is beneficial. It's not what can we do. If we're as Christians saying, how close can I get to sinning without sinning? Right? That's probably not the right attitude to have. They say, Lucado, he said it like this. He said, I've never seen somebody and just, man, their beer drinking, it just bumped their Christian testimony through the roof. Right? So it's not just what can we do. It's what should we do. What moves the kingdom forward? I've shared my heart on it. That's where I'm at. I want to finish with this thought. So what have we said? We said we got to use wisdom to see it. We got to be willing to walk through that window. And basically what Paul is saying here, you know what drunkenness does? It's just a waste of time. It is a waste of time. And it gives your body over, and you no longer have ability to make decisions to control what you do. And that is not okay. That is not okay. So if we're willing to walk through it, we got to sacrifice. We got to give up some things. We got to think different. We got to be willing to walk through it and prioritize and use our time in the right ways. That was fun. Imagine, here's where I want us to end. Imagine the weight of missing it. That's W-E-I-G-H-T. Got to use wisdom to see it. We got to be willing to walk through it. And you got to imagine the weight, the burden of missing it. Because you know windows, right? They open and they close. What he's saying is we have one life. We have one opportunity to walk and to do good. And if we're going to be serious about it, if you're going to get urgent about it, then you have to think about the weight of missing it. Because what you have to realize is this: we have to acknowledge. And we get in life some ways, and we think about all the busy things and all the things in our job and family and work and school and all that kind of stuff. And we forget that we have been dropped into a battlefield. We've been put into a battle that is a war. That is this epic battle of good and evil, raging every day. We're going to get to it in chapter 6. He says we are warring, we are fighting against spiritual things. The weight of not being focused on God's kingdom is a burden none of us want to bear. And what we find just from the pilgrims, this was amazing. This blew my mind. This was in the museum there. This was William Bradford's Bible that he brought with him from England. They had it sitting there. And I thought about the weight of that missed opportunity. Had they not set sail, had they not faced the great tragedies, had they not been willing to put it all on the line, had they not been willing to risk it, history would be different. I don't know what it would be like, but history would be different. What I want to say to you this morning, there is a window of opportunity in your life today. What you do with it will impact those around you. It's not just about you and your salvation and you coming to the Lord. It is about your children. It is about your spouse. It's about your parents. It's about your aunts. It's about your uncles. This was his other quote. Being thus arrived in a good harbor and brought safe to land, they fell upon their knees and blessed the God of heaven, who had brought them over the vast and furious ocean. They gave credit to God and they imagined the weight of not doing it. To miss a kingdom assignment because we're too caught up in our personal kingdom and success is one of the greatest tragedies we could ever face. Service always requires sacrifice. Service always requires sacrifice. There's an old story in the book of Esther I want to just close with. And it's about Esther. It's an amazing story. If you've never read it, I encourage you to read it. Chapter 4, there's a bit of a culmination of this story. Esther, God has worked in Esther's life providentially to bring her into the court of the king and is going to give her the opportunity to free her people, to free the Jewish people. And in that moment, where she has got to the court of the king, she's got wrapped up in the kingdom, in the palace. And Mordecai, he rebukes her. And he says this in chapter 4, verses 13 through 14. It says, Then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, Do not imagine that you in the king's palace can escape any more than all the Jews. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, and you and your father's house will perish. And let me ask you this, as he asked her this. And who knows whether you have not attained royalty? Who knows if you've not been put in the place that you are around the people that you're around in your faith for such a time as this? Rosie asked the clerk as we were checking out the little gift store there, she said, Where's the Mayfield? Or the Mayflower, where's the Mayflower? And the nurse was like, well, they don't really know what happened to it. And she was like, what? Why in the world? This is the boat that the pilgrims came over on. Why would somebody not have kept that, protected it, and still had it here? And so I was trying to explain to her, this is the value of history and looking back. When the Mayflower dropped the pilgrims off, it was really just a taxi. It was just another boat. This was another group of people. This was just another thing. You looking back, you can see and say, why did they not keep the Mayflower? And she was like, oh. And I thought, there's things in my life. There's people in my life. There's situations that I'm looking at right now and thinking this doesn't mean anything. It doesn't matter. They matter. They matter. God is using those things. That is wisdom. That is looking around you and say, what is God using? How is he working right now? Getting in his word and understanding more about who he is. He is working all around you. And if we're not careful, we just send the Mayflower back out and let it go. And we miss the boat and we feel the weight of a missed opportunity. If you're here this morning, I just want to give you a chance to If you would stand with us this morning. You may, I don't know where you are in your walk with Jesus. Maybe you've never made the first commitment to give your life to him. But your salvation depends upon that decision, your faith and your trust, and your decision to follow and trust in him. Or maybe you're in a position and a time in life that you see God is, you've not seen that he's given you this opportunity all around you to serve him, to step out in faith, to serve him and not ourselves. I just want to give you a chance to respond. If you feel God calling you to come pray, I give you the chance to come pray. Bring the sorrow, trade it for joy. Don't miss your window of opportunity. Oh, what a Savior we serve. Paul taught here, he taught to walk in love. He taught us about the difference of light and darkness, that we're to be the light. And he moves on and he says, use wisdom in your life. He is risen. He is risen to give us strength, power, and his resurrection over whatever we're facing in life.